This video has been funded through an educational grant from Biocon Biologics Limited. Biocon Biologics Limited has no input towards the content of the interview or the video. Now in its 47th year, the 2024 San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium, or SABCS, featured over 2,000 accepted abstracts and representatives from over 100 countries. Professor Nadia Harbeck spoke with us following the conference to highlight presentations that focus on the safety and efficacy of biosimilars in place of the originator medicine.
I think switching biosimilars in HER2-positive disease has become standard of care in Bavaria, where I practice in the Munich area, but Bavaria in a general setting. Our university hospitals have come together a couple of years from now and said, we're going to buy the trastuzumab with the best price for the Bavarian university hospitals. And then we were informed that that was going to be a biosimilar. I mean, obviously the originator was also able to bid. And then we were informed about the biosimilar. For the first time, we informed our patients and had them sign consent because some of the patients were switched at that time from the originator to the biosimilar. And then maybe 2 years later, they informed us they had another price bidding and found a different biosimilar that was a better pricing for the region. So then we switched again, and we had not observed any problems with our patients. So when I saw the poster from Dr. Niarshu, I thought it was very interesting. What they reported was 48 patients with HER2-positive disease, where they switched from one biosimilar, the SB3, to another one, the Ogivri, and they just concluded was safe. There was no infusion-related reactions or cardiac event after the switch. There's, interestingly enough, there was one patient with a allergic reaction, it appears, to the first biosimilar, but not after the switching. And they had a good PCR rate. They had some patients in all different settings, and they had a good PCR rate of, I think, 56% in the neoadjuvantly treated patients. So overall, I think confirming what we had experienced ourselves in our setting here, that it's very safe to switch from one biosimilar to the other. And now we only include in our consent forms for chemotherapy and antibody therapy that biosimilars may be used, so we don't have to inform patients about every single product that we're using. Yeah, there was a real world analysis from a Taiwanese center just looking at one specific biosimilar, MYL 14010 versus the reference trastuzumab, and they had patients in different settings, a group of patients in first-line metastatic disease and a group of patients in the neoadjuvant setting. I think a strong point of that poster was that they had a substantial patient number. They had about 150 patients in each group, and they looked at PCR rates and they looked at the PFS in the first line setting, and they saw no statistical differences. They saw a little bit of numerical differences, as you point out, favoring the originator in the neoadjuvant setting. But I think that we come down to small patient numbers here, and if the statistics don't show an interaction or a significance, I would tend to believe that this is just some normal fluctuation. We saw that actually in the development process of the biosimilars also, with the FDA approvals, that there were some biosimilars that had substantially greater PCR rates than the originator. And I think trastuzumab is such a difficult molecule because there's some glycosylation involved, and so sometimes the manufacturing process may get that right and sometimes may not have that so optimal. But I think if the overall ballpark shows it's similar in efficacy, then I think there's also differences between the individual batches. Yeah, I mean, that was I think a French study where they looked at several biosimilars and the originator in the first line metastatic setting. slightly over 100 patients, and they looked at 6 months PFS and saw that that was very much within the expected range of 81% of the patients being progression-free survival at that 6 months endpoint. So they also concluded that the efficacy of the combination between these different trastuzumab biosimilars and pertuzumab in chemotherapy was acceptable. There was a sentence in the tolerability section where they looked at cardiac toxicity, and they wrote that there was about 10% of patients who had some cardiac dysfunction, could be symptomatic or asymptomatic. But if you looked at the poster itself, it looked like there were some declines in left ventricular ejection fraction that was just greater than 10%, but not even under 50 altogether. So I think that is just showing us that we need to look at cardiac safety. Some of the patients already had seen anthracyclines before. So I think cardiac safety is something that needs to be monitored in those patients. They said they had no cardiac deaths, and so I think this is all within the range what we observe when we treat our patients. So no concerns whatsoever using a biosimilar versus the originator in conjunction with pertuzumab in chemotherapy in this setting.
What might the CLIMB LMD study, which is in accrual, determine?
Leptomeningeal disease is actually very rare. What we do see is more brain metastasis now that we have such effective therapy in the early breast cancer setting. We also see brain metastasis in HER2 positive disease quite early, already in first line. If you look at the Catherine data, which established TDM1 as the agent of choice in non PCR patients, you see that about half of the patients who develop relapse after TDM1 will have brain mets already in first line. So I think we're going to see more brain mets and probably following that also more leptomeningeal disease percent wise. But overall, I think metastatic HER2 positive breast cancer is going to be on the decline if we um, if we establish our modern therapies in the early breast cancer setting. So it's very, very difficult to treat. These patients don't live long, and we do have two agents that can help us there. One would be TDXD, where we just published the Destiny Breast 12 data last year, and the other one is tucatinib. And this poster here from Canada shows a study that they're going to do in Canada looking at tucatinib capecitabine with a trastuzumab biosimilar in those patients. They're going to do irradiation first and then adding the systemic therapy. And the primary endpoint is overall survival, starting from the start of the radiation therapy. So I think it's going to be difficult to recruit. That's why I can only congratulate those colleagues that they're going this on a, I think, national um, level. But I think it's going to be very helpful. There's already some data that tucatinib does work in patients with LMD, and I'm sure this study will provide more evidence.
And lastly, what are your thoughts on the approved biosimilars trialed against their originators when it comes to safety, efficacy, and cost?
Well, I mean, I'm not part of the FDA or the EMA, but I think I have complete trust in the way these biosimilars have been approved in the past. That they needed one sort of non-inferiority trial, and that would give them access to all the indications of the originator. I think that was something that saved a lot of time and resources, and there was also a very thorough preclinical evaluation of the compounds. And so I have complete trust in the biosimilars that are approved by our agencies, and I think that they will do a lot to help patients get access to these new medications. And I'm just looking forward to having more biosimilars come into the market for other originators as well. The pertuzumab biosimilars would be helpful together with the already existing trastuzumab biosimilars. And then I think what we're all looking forward to is seeing biosimilars for ADCs. Like the first one will be TDM1 probably, and then the other ones will follow suit. So I think that's probably complicated in the manufacturing process, but these companies are all very experienced, and so I have no doubt that they will come up with some good biosimilars that we can use in clinical practice. I think it's all about awareness, and uh, also maybe if there is like a buying synergy that, like in I told you about the Bavarian universities um, buying in for biosimilars. I think that if the large hospital chains or so are working together, that will also help getting the prices down. But I think awareness is everything, and um, we as a doctor do not decide this ultimately, but the pharmacy does. But obviously, if we had any concerns, we wouldn't be using those products. So I'm quite fine with helping the health system to save costs, so we can spend the money on new agents that just being developed.